scientists installed a camera in the coffin. What they saw during the observation process left them surprised. In a small and intimate funeral gathering, a few individuals paid their respects to the deceased around an open coffin. The funeral was attended by only a handful of people. Meanwhile, two men patiently waited in a car nearby, eager to bid their final farewells. After the last person left the cemetery, the men emerged from their vehicle. The sister of the departed quickly announced that arrangements were made for a commemorative gathering at the house and invited everyone present for a funeral meal. Some compassionate women waited until the coffin was lowered into the earth before symbolically saying their final goodbyes by gently tossing soil. Amidst the emotions, Kaylee found herself overwhelmed with tears due to a secret experiment she had agreed to participate in. However, she understood it would be inappropriate to ask everyone to leave the cemetery, so she silently struggled with her conflicting emotions. The two young men were present by the coffin to discreetly install a camera for a scientific study, not for personal gain. The sister, hesitant to mention her intention of profiting from her deceased brother, decided to keep the financial reward to herself to preserve the sanctity of the moment. The overseeing scientist confirmed that this endeavor was driven by a pursuit of knowledge, and everyone present supported the sister's contribution for the sake of science. There was no judgment, only understanding. With all preparations meticulously completed, the lid was gently placed upon the coffin. As the camera setup was finalized, one of the gentlemen gave a solemn command. The sister, her hand instinctively covering her mouth, watched with a mix of emotions as the lid was securely fastened with 2 screws and the coffin was reverently lowered into the grave, guided by gentle ropes. After gently wiping away her tears, she delicately scooped up a handful of soil, her emotions swirling within her. A compassionate voice broke through her solitude as a woman placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. Kaylee looked at her with a mixture of confusion and curiosity, realizing she didn't recognize anyone present and had never shared a close bond with her brother. In that moment, she was certain that he had no immediate family or intimate connection with any woman.
As the grave slowly filled with earth, the woman who had initiated this act of reverence remained by Kaylee's side, sharing heartfelt memories of Nicholas. The bereaved sister listened attentively, feeling a sense of obligation to honor her brother's life. Yet she couldn't help but wonder why this stranger assumed she would be interested in these stories. After all, Kaylee and her brother had a significant age gap, leading to divergent interests and experiences. If it weren't for his untimely passing, she wouldn't have delved deeper into his life. In the present moment, Kaylee's thoughts were consumed by the practicalities of hosting these few acquaintances and returning to her own daily routine. However, the persistent woman managed to shed some light on her brother's character. "My brother had a truly kind heart. He left all his possessions to a nursing home," she revealed. This statement stirred a mix of emotions within Kaylee, considering the funeral arrangements, paperwork, and commemoration she had to coordinate. Now, the nursing home would benefit financially from her brother's estate, adding another layer of complexity to her already burdened shoulders. The elderly woman, though burdened herself, had managed to gain something from her brother's passing. She had discovered Nicholas peacefully sleeping on the couch, only to realize later that he had ceased to breathe. Uncertain of what to do in such a situation, she accompanied him to the hospital, seeking guidance. The doctors informed her that an autopsy would be necessary to determine the cause of death, despite Kaylee's religious beliefs and request to forgo the procedure. Regulations, it seemed, could not be bypassed, especially if the deceased hadn't suffered from any known illnesses. Only a pathologist could definitively ascertain the cause of her brother's passing. Reluctantly, Kaylee consented to the autopsy, feeling a mix of resignation and helplessness. However, 2 young men unexpectedly offered their assistance. They had been searching for willing volunteers to participate in an experiment for several days, but without family consent, they were unable to proceed. In an unusual twist of fate, the sister and brother became the perfect candidates for their research. Kaylee reluctantly shared the news that her brother would soon be handled by a pathologist. However, these young scientists skillfully persuaded the doctors that an autopsy was unnecessary. After a thorough discussion of the deceased's diagnosis, they reached the conclusion that his passing was indeed a result of heart-related issues. The elderly woman felt a wave of relief, knowing that her brother's body would not undergo further examination. Deep down, she believed that if he could have expressed his opinion, he too would have preferred an undisturbed burial. Though her conscience still troubled her, she found solace in the fact that she had not violated any of God's commandments, despite allowing a video camera in the coffin. While she couldn't bring her brother back, the additional financial compensation brought by this arrangement would not harm anyone. Undeniably, it was the reward that ultimately led her to accept the offer. The compensation for participating in this experiment was substantial, and with her brother's passing, her life saw not only sorrow but also a glimmer of joy. On the very same day the cameras were discreetly placed in the coffin, she received a generous $10,000 transfer. Kaylee, remaining skeptical until the end, had her doubts about whether the experimenters would truly keep their promise and provide her with such a prompt reward. However, this gift brought her immense joy, especially after discovering at the funeral that her brother had selflessly donated his money to unrelated elderly individuals. It became clear why she had felt a sense of unease towards the talkative woman present at the service. As Kaylee suspected, the woman worked at a nursing home and had likely tried to establish a connection with her brother in hopes of acquiring his house. While she had been aware of the house's construction beforehand, it had never concerned her. She had never given it much thought, and now there was no reason for her to be upset. Life, after all, consisted of both gains and losses. As it turned out, dealing with the scientist had proven to be even more advantageous. Let the peculiar lady take possession of Nicholas's house. The experiment Kaylee had agreed to was straightforward and had brought unexpected benefits. She found no fascination in the outcomes. They were far too unsettling. The scientists had been assigned the task of meticulously observing the gradual decomposition of the body. The camera, powered by a battery with an estimated lifespan of a year, would not continuously record. Instead, it would activate precisely once a day for a mere 60 seconds at the stroke of 11 p.m. In that brief moment, the camera would capture the scene before gracefully shutting down. These were the intricate details that the scientists had shared with her. She regarded it all as nonsensical, a pursuit that seemed to hold no benefit for anyone but herself. Yet she couldn't help but acknowledge that it would ultimately enhance her living conditions and perhaps even grant her the opportunity to embark on a long-awaited cruise. Despite being under the age of 60, she firmly believed that as a woman, she had every right to dream. After bidding farewell at the funeral, Kaylee returned to the solace of her home. Her brother's memory could easily be pushed aside. Their relationship had never been particularly close, and her grief would not be overwhelming. Meanwhile, the scientists were entrusted with the task of observing her brother's remains for an entire year. The culmination of their efforts would lie in the collection of comprehensive data, but for now, their focus was on ensuring that everything was functioning flawlessly. Two young men, brimming with impatience, eagerly awaited the activation of the camera, yearning to confirm its proper setup. The hour grew late, and their eagerness to return home intensified. However, on that very first day, they bore witness to something inexplicable. They replayed the 1-minute footage repeatedly, their minds grappling to find a logical explanation. Perhaps the body had shifted during its descent into the coffin or when the lid was closed. The possibilities were limited, and neither of them could fathom why the body no longer resembled its appearance at the funeral. The hands were positioned near the head, and the contorted posture of the body suggested a desperate attempt to escape the confines of the coffin. The young men swiftly dismissed the notion of heading home. Instead, they resolved to visit the cemetery and exhume the grave. Determined to act swiftly, they embarked on this clandestine operation, knowing that obtaining official permission for such an endeavor would likely consume precious time. If their assumptions were indeed correct, time was of the essence. Their decision proved to be remarkably accurate. The man who lay inside the confines of the coffin was, astonishingly, still alive. Nicholas, in dire need of medical assistance, was fortunate enough to be rescued by the determined efforts of the individuals involved. It was a race against time, for had they arrived even a moment later, his survival would have been uncertain at best. As the man who had once been declared deceased regained consciousness, he recounted the harrowing tale of his near-death experience. To his disbelief, it was his own sister who had orchestrated this treacherous act of poisoning. On that fateful day, she had paid him a visit seemingly innocent, only to broach the subject of diamonds. Kaylee, Nicholas's half-sister, had entered his life when their father married a woman with a child. At the time, she was just 11 years old, an eccentric and envious child prone to frequent tantrums. Despite her disruptive behavior, their father, driven by his love for his wife, had dismissed her actions. As time went on, Nicholas distanced himself from Kaylee, eventually moving out and never forming a close bond with her. Their father, a man of wealth and peculiar passion for collecting diamonds, had made the decision to bestow his precious collection upon his son, a choice Nicholas deemed fair. In a gesture of inclusion, he had not excluded his sister entirely as she inherited the family apartment. Sadly, their father's wife had passed away prior to his own demise. The passing of their father occurred 6 years prior, and it was only a year later that Kaylee began her attempts to establish a relationship with her half-brother. Nicholas, believing that his sister sought solace and companionship in her twilight years, welcomed her advances with open arms. Little did he know, however, that Kaylee harbored ulterior motives. Gradually, she began to broach the subject of diamonds, subtly hinting at her desire for an equal share of the inheritance. What need did a solitary elderly man have for such vast wealth? His only passion in life was fishing, and his pension provided for his modest needs. Nicholas, not taking her pleas seriously, would often jest and tease her, playfully questioning, "Why do you need diamonds at your age? Planning to embark on grand adventures?" Kaylee's presence, though infrequent, became increasingly focused on the matter of diamonds. Yet Nicholas never suspected that his sister would stoop to such sinister depths. However, on that fateful evening when she allegedly discovered his lifeless body, her true intentions were laid bare for all to see. In a surprising turn of events, Nicholas's sister, Kaylee, visited him one evening to discuss diamonds. However, her true intention was to search his home for the precious gems. Kaylee added something to Nicholas's tea, causing him to fall into a deep sleep. When he woke up, he found himself trapped in a coffin, a victim of Kaylee's excessive use of sleeping pills. Fortunately, fate intervened, and Nicholas managed to survive. Despite the betrayal, Nicholas's forgiving nature prevented him from involving the authorities, and Kaylee would have denied any wrongdoing if confronted. Kaylee's desperate search for diamonds yielded no results, leading her to try and wake her brother for answers. However, he appeared lifeless, prompting Kaylee to devise a plan. She cleared any evidence of their shared tea and declared her brother's supposed death to authorities. Unbeknownst to her, scientists offered her a chance to profit from his demise. As she fantasized about a luxurious cruise, her supposedly deceased brother arrived with the police. Ironically, Kaylee's attempt to profit had inadvertently saved his life. Nicholas, having donated the diamonds to support children with cancer, showed compassion and requested a lenient sentence for Kaylee. It was an unfortunate result that his sister would end up in prison, her excessive desire depriving her of the anticipated cruise. However, the message struck a chord. Greed leads to negative outcomes, and it is much more rewarding to have modest possessions earned through honest efforts than to envy what others have. Nicholas, always satisfied with life's simple joys, remained devoted to his beloved fishing, forever perplexed by the fascination with far-off resorts when there were numerous magnificent places to discover nearby.